Let's get real for a second. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your business empire that you built is on the verge of collapse. Not because of the market, not because of bad decisions, but because the one person who holds everything together, your key employee, your right hand, your operations manager, is suddenly gone. So, what happens next? Deals fall through, clients begin to panic, revenue starts to dry up, and your company starts to slowly crumble. And you're forced to make the hardest decision of your life. So, do you fight to keep that business alive, or do you walk away from everything you built? This is not just a hypothetical scenario. It's a reality for thousands of business owners every year. And yet most aren't prepared. But today, I assure you, you'll be better prepared. I'm Kevin Ross, and in this episode of Plan Life Right, we're diving into a wealth strategy that 99% of business owners overlook. But the smartest entrepreneurs are there using it to protect their legacy, to secure their financial future, and to build untouchable wealth. What's it called? It's called Index Universal Life Insurance. And I guarantee by the end of this episode, you'll see it not as an expense, but as the most powerful financial asset you've never used. And to help me break this down, I've got the perfect guest, Matt Floyd, a financial expert who's helped business owners turn financial disasters into financial empires. So, Matt, let's get into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Kevin. And I love how you started this because let's be real. Most business owners do not have a real financial strategy. They think, my business is my retirement plan. I'll just sell my company when I retire. I don't need life insurance. I'm reinvesting that money into my business. But the brutal truth is 50% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, even the ones that are making money today. A business is also only worth what someone is willing to pay for it and at the time that you're willing to sell it. And most owners realize too late that their company isn't sellable or they're going to be taking a lot bigger hit than they thought. And if something happens to either the business owner or the key employee, the whole operation collapses overnight. So the question isn't, do I need a financial strategy? The question is, how long can you afford to be unprotected before a disaster hits?
That's a great point, Matt. That's why we're here today talking about Index Universal Life or IULs. But I want to clear the air. This isn't just life insurance, it's a financial weapon. It allows business owners to grow tax free wealth without having to rely on that stock market. And let's face it, we've been in kind of a roller coaster here the first few months. We saw the market take off once Trump got elected. And now, anytime the market hears the word tariff, it starts selling off, and it's been selling off drastically. So, an IUL protects that advisor from leveraging their stock portfolio to borrow money or what have you, especially if they need it now and the market's losing value there. It also allows you to, the IUL allows you to access liquid cash when they need it. There's no penalties to borrow against their policy. There's no restrictions.
There's no
And
credit checks even.
there's because you're your own bank.
Yeah.
So, um, what it does is it allows that business owner to protect their business as well as their family and give them some options if something were to happen to them or even a key employee. So,
So,
Matt,
I mean, it's basically like a savings account on steroids, is what you're saying.
that's exactly it's exactly it because with the savings account, yeah, you've got the liquidity, but the money that's earning interest, that's taxable. The money inside that IUL is tax-free money. You just borrow against it, right? So
Yeah.
it is. I'd like that. It's a savings account on steroids, essentially.
And I think that's where most people have this misconception of what is life insurance. A death benefit, that's death insurance. That's to insure your family and your business when you die. And if your insurance agent is talking to you about the death benefit, you should find a new insurance agent because the cash value that builds inside of your policy is the real reason why you go after it. I've asked every client I've ever set up in an insurance policy, if you're going to throw your money at something, you want it to be a window it flies out of or a bucket that fills up. And permanent insurance is a bucket that fills up. And you can see with an IUL, the bucket fills up faster than you're putting money into it. And after just a few years, you've got more in there than you've ever put in there. And it just continues to grow like that. And like Kevin says, you got access to all that free capital.
That's exactly right. Great point, Matt. I wanted to share a story that I talked about in the book. And this guy, Michael, he had a retail shop, and I'd spoken to him in the early 2000s after that financial crisis about what about protecting your business with the IUL. And Michael, like most business owners, his mindset was to pour everything that he made into his company. So every dollar that he earned almost, he reinvested it. So he reinvested it in inventory, in marketing, and operations. It all went back into growing that business.
But yeah, the business 101 stuff. The first stuff they teach you when you go to business
Uh,
school.
Exactly right. And so, he figured, and when we spoke, he mentioned this. He said that the best way and his best bet, he was betting on himself, and he was growing his business rather than taking the plan that we put together and set that aside for the future. So he had a 401k, and his employees um, that worked for his retail business that he franchised, they had a 401k, and he had one as well. And that was essentially his safety net. And he felt pretty comfortable, with that being a safety net. But then let's fast forward a few years. '08 happens, the financial crisis, the market downturns 40%. And so what happens to that 401k and that savings that he built? He lost it. And then what a lot of people didn't think about was the banks. You know, what happened with the banking then? It's if we go back in time just a little bit, banks weren't giving any money out. They were trying to stay afloat. The federal government was bailing out the big banks. Remember, too big to fail. So the liquidity dried up in his retail business. People were kind of in shock, and he started feeling that pinch. So, what was his options? Well,
He could try to go to the bank and borrow it, but back then you had a better chance of walking in a ski mask and walking out of there with
yeah,
cash than walking up to a loan manager in a Brooks Brothers suit and getting a loan for anything.
that's right. His 401k was locked up. The guy was 50 years old, I think, at the time. So if he pulled it out, not only would he have to pay at his tax bracket, but he also would have incurred a 10% penalty tax, right? Because he
And he
withdrew
loses the
before.
earning power of having that money to work for him in the market.
That's right. So if he lost 40% of his value and then he borrowed 10%, not only does he have to make out the 40, he's got to make out the 10, and he's got to make up the taxes that he paid. So he essentially had to take out more than 10%, to get that money out. So it was really a distress situation. And I knew so many people, Michael's struggling with his retail business. I had several builder friends that were having to claim bankruptcy because now they had too much too much inventory. They had houses that were homes that they were building for people. Those people backed out because financing went away. So across the industry, you saw just that ripple effect. And even now, you're seeing that ripple effect on inflation. And we're starting to see what, 3, 4 years of continued inflation. And at one point, we were kind of in a hyperinflation, like we were under the Carter administration, very similar. And now we're feeling that pain right now. And then to throw tariffs on it is more
Yeah.
fuel to the fire, right?
Yeah, it's brutal. And I mean, it's a sad reality for a lot of business owners, and they just don't realize the hot water they're in until it's already boiling and it's too late. Life insurance, you mentioned being able to have a plan for the future. There's a guy, his name's in a lot of shopping malls still today. He was able to stave off financial ruin during the Great Depression. His name is J.C. Penney. He used
Heard
his
of that
life
guy.
insurance policy. Yeah. He used his life insurance policy to purchase inventory during the Depression, to pay employee salaries, to cover costs of his stores. And he did that with an old-fashioned whole life policy. IULs weren't even around back then. But that's just one example of somebody that thought ahead, was thinking about tomorrow as much as they were thinking about today. And they had a plan in case the worst did eventually come. And it did. And JC Penney's still around to this day.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Didn't Walt Disney have some kind of similar
Oh, he
story?
grew his business. They told him a permanent carnival was crazy. They wouldn't let him have money out of his own company with his own name on it. And the banks at the time didn't think a permanent carnival was a good idea either. So he used his whole life insurance policy and he invented Disneyland. And every theme park in the world is a debt of gratitude to Walt Disney and his insurance salesman.
Yeah, right. That's a great point. It brings me up to a story, I talked about this story in the book. This guy's name is David, and David, this was a financial advisor that I was working with, and he had a customer. We'll call him David, and David was into real estate investing, and so David was, taking his profits and leveraging like so many do, and then buying more real estate. And what my financial advisor buddy that I was working with, what we did in this case was we looked at his revenue coming in, and we basically built um, a strategy where we were taking $200,000 per year, and we redirected that 200,000 that he was using, more, but he was using that to build his real estate, and we put it into an IUL policy that again offers tax-free growth, liquidity with the policy loans. He got to avoid using the banks because he didn't have to use the banks and set up his real estate as collateral. He had this IUL policy that now was essentially his bank. And so after 10 years, this story is really good. So after 10 years, he weathered the storm of 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, all these houses with real. So he had money to reinvest, and he built um, that cash value to $4.8 million. That's completely tax free.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
that's something else that a lot of people miss because when you think about 401ks, they allow you to take a loan out of it. But when you do that, you take $100,000 or $200,000 out of your 401k to use as financing, you lose the investing power of that money being in the market and working for you. When you do the same thing with a life insurance policy, the cash that you're getting doesn't even come from the cash value. It comes from the death benefit at the end of the life of the policy if you haven't paid it back. So you've got the rest of your life to pay it back. You're getting it at an interest rate that no bank would ever be able to approve you for. You don't have to take a hit on your credit. and your policy continues to earn interest and dividends just like it would have if you had never touched it.
That's a great point. And in this case with David, he borrowed I think around 1.5 million, 2 million, if I remember the story. And he was able to take advantage of all these foreclosed properties, these distressed properties, and he just borrowed from himself, right? He, like you said, he it decreases the death benefit, but he was, if he borrowed from the bank, he was paying back the bank. He can pay himself back, make himself whole if he wanted to. He didn't have to.
Yeah, and a
He
further
did.
downturn ends up costing him because now he can't pay the bank back. And now
That's
his
right.
credit is shot for the next 7 to 10 years. He ends up filing bankruptcy, losing everything he worked for.
Like so many did.
Yeah,
Uh, and so here's a crazy story. Year 20, which we just had that anniversary, I think year year or two ago, something like that. Um, he had in his IUL over $12 million. So so not only, I'm not talking about his real estate investments. That was in the hundreds of millions now, but
that's just the cash in his savings
that's
account on steroids.
cash
Yeah.
back into his IUL.
So
And he's
he was in the right place at the right time and had the right access to cheap capital because
That's
he
right.
planned ahead like so many don't.
Exactly right. And he doesn't have to pay anymore. He doesn't have to pay 200,000 a year. He's done. His thing's just growing. And so he's got all this excess cash value that he's able to borrow for whatever he wants. It's
Yeah, and you
really,
don't even
really
have to put it
powerful.
into your business. You can borrow that money and buy a vacation home. You can borrow that money and put your kids to college, put your grandkids through college, put them all through college. Doesn't even matter. You got $12 million, and it's your money that you saved and earned, and you got the upside of the market and none of the downside. Because Kevin can talk about how there's a floor on an IUL. You can't ever lose your money in it.
Yeah, that's right. So you bring up a great point. A lot of people, oh, these IULs are too confusing. There's a couple key features here that are just, I think, game changers. The fact that in a down year, so when 08, 09 happened, um, those negative numbers were zeros. And then the power of these is it has a mechanism called an annual reset. So I'll do a simple example. The market's down 20%, then you reset at that new lower level. If you're tied to the S&P, so let's just say the S&P is down 20, you now start at the lower level, so you don't have to make up the loss. In this case, we had 2 down years. So you had 2 zeros, but you reset at that lowest number. And then when the market started to make a comeback, he's making money because he doesn't have to overcome the losses like you would in your 401k,
Yeah.
or if
So
you're
the
investing.
401k for those 2 down years, the 2 negative years, those would have gone negative. You would have realized actual losses in your portfolio, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
But the IUL stayed at zero. So the most you can lose is nothing.
That's right. And the key takeaway with this story of David is, um, the, he had control. So many business owners feel like if I'm putting money in this, I lose control. So Michael, I'm betting on myself. I'm betting on the business. Well, his business was fine until it wasn't. Not anything he did wrong, because of what happened to the market and the ripple effect. And we're seeing these stories about Michael happening today because of 4 years, three of them kind of hyperinflation. And now we're seeing that ripple effect. Everybody thinks, oh, inflation, you immediately see the impact of it. Well, we do as consumers, but business owners can sometimes weather the storm because of their cash flow or what have you, than than the business owner begins to feel the tightness of it, right? And then they start uh, losing money, and then sometimes have to shutter. So, and that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, every day,
Or
right?
it ends up even worse. I mean, some business owners, they're losing money. They decide to just close up shop and everything they worked for is gone. A lot of business owners, especially ones that I've worked with, they have reached out to banks and they have taken on loans and then their credit was shot and then they've had to get hard money lending involved to now their problem that was maybe $250,000 problem at the outset. It's now a problem that's 1.5 million. They'll just never be able to crawl out from under it.
That's right. That's right. And and once you're headed down that hole, it's really daunting to get out of it. And
Yeah, especially
cash
with a
value.
business that you owned, you have that emotional connection to it. You
That's right.
don't want to give up on it so easily. So you take drastic measures to save it. It's on life support, and not everybody on life support comes back, and that's true for businesses more than people, I bet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And whether you're a business owner, whether it's real estate or a law firm or a doctor's practice, uh, these IULs can be a game changer because you've got tax-free growth. You're minimizing some of the tax consequences you have as a business owner, um, and you provide yourself with some liquidity that people don't think of to normally. They think IUL, that's life insurance, that's an expense, and it should be thought of as an asset, a financial asset, and a powerful one. So, if you're a business owner and you need a real wealth strategy, not just a business exit plan, taxes, lack of liquidity, market downturns, they'll ruin even the best laid plans. But again, can't emphasize this enough. IULs, it's not an expense. Don't think of it as an expense. I like to call it the ultimate financial tool for protection, flexibility, and growth.
Yeah. And for advisors, I mean, here's your role. You need to shift your owners' mindsets. They need to start thinking about personal wealth, not just the wealth of the business. You can show them the numbers. Call me. I'll run an illustration for you to show you exactly what a modest investment in an IUL can turn into in just a few years. Business valuations are unpredictable. There was a time even in the early 2000s, Blockbuster Video was printing money. 5 years later, you couldn't find one open anymore. And I bet you all those guys had business valuations that showed that they had a very profitable business. But an IUL creates certainty, it's measurable certainty. And you get to position yourself as a trusted expert because the advisor who helps business owners avoid financial traps, he wins for life. And let's say disaster never hits. Let's pray it never hits. Your business owner gets to sell his business that he built for decades for a profit, and he still walks away with a cash value life insurance policy with more in it than he ever put into it.
Great point. Great point, Matt. So here's the deal. If you're a business owner and you want to start future proofing your finances, go to planliferight.com, planliferight.com, and we can break down IUL strategies in a way that makes sense for you, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the legal practice, the doctor's practice. We can help with that. And if you're a financial advisor and you want to start closing more IUL sales, like Matt mentioned, then check out advisorrescuemarketing.net, advisorrescue.net. And Matt can show you how to position IULs as a must-have financial tool, how to speak to business owners, doctors, lawyers, real estate investors, and how to use an IUL as a asset, not an expense. So if you like this episode, and I hope you did, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode because someone in your network, I bet, needs to hear this today.